Okie dokie, I'm gonna do a little tutorial today, but before I get started, I wanted to show you guys why I absolutely love having my projector for sewing rather than printing and taping up patterns all the time. I have this roll of freezer paper from Costco. Can't remember how much it costs, but it's not expensive. I have my projector up there that I got from Amazon. I think they're a little bit less than $200. And I have that hooked up to my computer, which projects my patterns down onto my cutting mat. So today I have traced out the pattern sizes for Canis, the Little Lizard King Canis. In a size 2, a size 4, and a size 6. One modification I do on the Canis pattern is the pattern calls for the front and back to be the same, but I raise the neckline up about an inch or so. I kind of eyeball it. I like it to be a little bit higher in the front than the pattern calls for. So I do one back, one front on the fold for both, and an optional flutter sleeve, which I'm not going to be doing on these little simple sundresses I'm making today. But so that's it for the pattern pieces, and now I'm going to cut them out. Okay, so I got my pattern pieces for my size 2 cut out, and the pattern comes with this cut chart. So instead of referring back to this for each pattern, I just wrote what I need for this particular dress. I am doing just the simple skirt. I'm not doing the tiered version. So for this, the skirt pieces that I'm gonna cut are gonna be 13 inches by 28 inches. I'm gonna cut 2 of those. The pattern actually calls for 7 5/8 by 27 7/8. I'm sorry, that's if you want it to be a shirt. The pattern for the dress calls for 12 3/8 by 27 7/8. So as you can see, I just rounded up and did 13 by 28, just to make it easier for measuring. So I like to cut my skirt pieces first because they're straight lines. I'll do that first and then I'll cut the bodice. The way I get the straight lines is I have the 2 selvage edges here and I line them up like this. I keep my pointer finger in between the 2 so that I can kind of wiggle them. And the goal here is that I have it a straight crease on the bottom. So I line it up here on my cutting mat. Actually, I go this way. So I've got my selvage edges lined up, and I've got my straight seam down here on the bottom. Okay, so the way I make this line nice and straight. Okay, so I'm gonna line up my fabric line directly on a straight line here of this ruler. And then I'm going to just cut here along this edge to make sure that I have a nice straight cut. Okay. Take that off, and there we have a nice straight cut. So here I have 7 inches on this ruler, okay? So I have it lined up at the 7 inches, and then I'm going to put my 6-inch ruler right next to it. So now I have a total of 13 inches here for the one skirt. I don't want you to film me, I want you to film what I'm doing, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So there's one, and you need 2 of these. So I lift these up, move that just a little bit. And I'm gonna line this one up on the 7 inches. and lay my 6-inch ruler next to it for a total of 13 again. And get that line cut straight. Might be better if you do it like this so you can see what I'm seeing. Look in the camera. Look in the camera right here. Yeah. Okay, let's make sure that cut. Oh, I missed a little spot because I stopped. Okay, so there we go. Now we have our 2 skirt pieces here. We have the 13 inches cut, and the cut says to do 13 by 28, so now we'll go ahead and trim it down to 48 inches. 28 inches. Okay, so now I'm just gonna trim these pieces down to 28. Come here, Jibber. Okay, you hold this like this. Okay, and the first thing I'm gonna do is just cut a straight edge here. So I line, this line needs to be straight on the raw edge of the fabric, okay? And as you'll see, is the print is not always straight, so you can't go off of the print. See here, it's thicker down here and it gets skinnier. So I'm making sure that my ruler is on the print the whole way. Okay, so cut that piece off. Okay, and now I'm gonna flip this piece over so that my straight edge is over here at the 1-inch mark. And we're gonna go to the 28-inch mark here. Excuse my voice, I literally just woke up this morning and I'm still waking up. Okay, here we have one down to 28. So I'm gonna place my ruler at the 28 inches. So I can see I'm lining it up here on the 28 all the way up to here. It's on that straight line. So I'm gonna cut that. And we'll save this little scrap for something else. And I'm gonna do the same one to the other little side of the skirt. Okay, I've got my 2 skirt pieces for my size 2 dress. And now I'm going to use these little scrap pieces that came off of the length of the skirt pieces and show you how to make the bias tape that this pattern calls for. Okay, so we need some bias tape here, and the way we do that is by cutting out a square of fabric and cutting it at a 90-degree angle on the bias of the fabric, which is just so that it will have a little bit of stretch. So the way we do that, the way I do that is I line my square up on this 90-degree angle line that my cutting mat has. That makes it nice and easy. And then I take my long ruler and I line my ruler up on that line. So if you have a perfect square, you really don't need the line on your cutting mat, just do corner to corner. And we're gonna do some cutting on this. Oops, that's the piece I needed. Okay, so we're gonna do 1 1/4 inch pieces of this. Okay, sorry, I'm spinning it all around. This is how it was. Now, take this straight line and I line it up 1 1/4 inch on the raw edge there. Okay, now I have one little strip here. Do another 1 1/4 inch strip. Lining it up nice and straight each time. There's another little strip. Now I'm using the lines on my ruler, not on my cutting mat. Get a couple more out of this. Let's do one more. Okay. So here I have my strips for the bias tape. You'll see this in the pattern instructions. So basically what you do here is sew these each together. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and make them all square by just cutting off the corners here real quick. I have like a number 7 going here. Right side up, right side down, and I'm going to stitch from this corner down to this corner. And if you wanted, you could draw a line, you could use your ruler to make a really straight line, but I just eyeball this. So right now I'm going to take these pieces to my machine. I'm going to do the same thing with all of these. Stitch from this corner down to this corner and make one continuous bias tape. I'm going to do a back stitch here, and then stitch all the way down, and back stitch again, and we'll pull it out, and that gives us a nice thingy. You can't really tell here, you'll be able to tell after I iron it and stuff. Okay, go ahead and turn it off. Got my strip here, and now I'm just going to take it, and on each seam line, I just eyeball this part, but I cut it about 1/4 of an inch away from the seam, the stitch. I'm doing this with one hand, so anyways, do I cut that little piece off? Me and Ibby, and then we will take it to the ironing table and iron it flat after I cut all of these seam allowances off. Now what we're going to do is iron the seam allowance flat. So I just open it up with my finger like this, and then I iron it flat. Like that. And I do that with all of them. Okay, so now I'm going to do that to all of them. So now to finish up the bias tape, we put the wrong sides together. So we're just going to fold it in half like this. And we're going to iron it, press it nice and flat. And we're going to do that all the way down to the whole strip. Here we have our finished bias tape. It's just a long strip with wrong sides ironed together, and we will be using that in the construction of this dress. Now it's time to cut our bodice pieces out. So as you'll see, the pattern piece says to cut on the fold. Cut one on the fold. Both of these pieces will do the same. So I'm just going to fold my fabric over here like this. Hobby Lobby does a very good job of straight cuts. Other companies and a lot of the online companies I order from do also, but sorry to say, but Joann's does not, and you usually have to waste a lot of fabric just to get a straight cut. So keep that in mind. If you go to Joann's, you might need to order a little bit of extra fabric to make up for that. So what I do here is I place my pattern piece on the fold of the fabric. And so now I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out. Keep your fingers out of the way of that blade. Very important. Okay, so we just cut this out. And now when we open it up, we have our back bodice. Okay, so now we're gonna fold over for our next piece. Okay, so we place that on the fold. And now we have our front bodice. So you can see now that they're cut out the way I modified here. From the back has a V and the front has more of a scoop. We're gonna start with the bodice, and the first thing that we do is we put them together with right sides together. And I'm gonna take this over to my machine and I'm gonna stitch across each shoulder. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a straight stitch here, a straight stitch here, and then I'm gonna come down and do a straight stitch on each of the side seams. All right, I'm using my serger for this. Normally, they want you to do sewing machine stitch and then serger, but I want to be fast. I'm just using my serger. If you don't have a serger, you can do this with a regular machine. You just wouldn't have the finished edges that the serger gives you. And you could always do a straight stitch with your machine and then go back over it with a zigzag stitch to finish the edges so they don't fray as much. So I did the two shoulders, one side seam, and now I'm doing the other side seam. You want to make sure those raw edges are lined up nicely. And let's see if I can reach my scissors. Oh. I'll snip these little strings off. Oops, where's my trash can? okay? And then when we flip it over, oops, I forgot to snip this one. Flip it inside out. And you can see it coming together already. This is the back, this is the front. So as you can see, the neck opening and the arm openings are raw. That's where the bias tape comes in. So now I'm gonna show you how to finish that up. So I'm gonna start the bias tape at the back of the neck opening, and I'm gonna go down about, I'm gonna leave about a 1-inch tail right at the V. And I'm gonna be lining up all 3 raw edges, the 2 raw edges of the bias tape and the 1 raw edge of the bodice. So I'm just gonna put that into my machine. This is with a regular sewing machine. And I'm gonna I do about a 1/8 inch seam allowance for this. So I'm lining it up at the 1/8 inch marker. All right, I'm gonna do a little back stitch here. And then we're gonna move forward. So as you can see, I have my bodice raw edge and my bias tape, and I'm just gonna keep lining them up like that as I go. And just nice and slowly turning as you go. I like these seams, these shoulder seams, to face the back of the bodice. So I'm gonna just press it down towards the back and continue on. Oh, and I also should mention that I am doing this on the right side of the fabric. Okay, well, hold on 1 second here. Okay, so now this is gonna cross over this tail that we left, as you see, and I'm gonna stop my stitch right here where I started this one. Give a little bit of a closer look here. Okay, this is the tail that we left, and we're gonna meet them up here. So I'm gonna stop stitching here and back stitch. Okay, so now I'm just gonna cut this piece. Give it a nice tail to be able to finish it off. But this is what your bias tape should look like. Okay, right now. And then we're gonna take it to the iron and show you what to do next. So here I'm showing you the wrong side, the inside of the bodice. And we have this edge right here, this unfinished edge that would fray. And then from the front of the bodice, it looks like this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna iron this nice and flat right on the crease. Okay, so the crease is on the top, and this is what it looks like on the inside. So that raw edge will be covered. So here we go. Just gonna start ironing like this, and just pressing along the crease all the way around. Like that. I'm gonna do that all the way around. This is about the most detailed you have to get with this pattern. But what you do is, these are the tails that we left at the back of the V. So you're gonna just iron a little crease there to hide that raw edge. you're gonna iron this one as well. Just iron that raw edge down a little bit, okay? They're overlapped, and then you're just gonna tuck this piece in like this. Okay, so it'll be like that, so that there's no raw edges. Here, can you hold this for me? Okay, so it'll be more like, I'm just gonna tuck that in like that. Okay, and this will be top stitched, and before we top stitch, we're gonna cut this so that the raw edge will be inside of this binding piece. Okay, hopefully you can see how that works. All right, so I've used some clips here to hold in place as I put it into my machine, so I don't have to mess with it anymore. I'm gonna start my stitch here, and we're gonna sew right on the fold, like literally right on the fold, all the way around. Got a back stitch going there. Nice and slow here. Okay, and I'm gonna turn. Okay. Let's line that back up. Tuck that little raw edge in there. Okay, and I'm keeping this folded as I go. Now I am back at where I began, so I'm going to back stitch, lift up my needle on my foot, and here is the finished part of the back. And we're gonna, all we have to do now is cut the strings. But when I flip it inside out, I can show you that we now have the bodice finished here, like this. And as I'm realizing right now, I forgot to switch my thread, so I have white thread. I didn't remember to put my matching thread in, but oh well. So here's the bodice. I feel like it's not getting it good.
It is.
Okay. Now we're on the armholes. Okay, so I'm gonna start at the seam on the underarm. And we're gonna take the bias tape, and we want the raw edges lined up together. And I'm just gonna fold down a little bit here. And I'm gonna line the fold up directly onto the seam. And then we're gonna stitch another 1/8 inch seam on all the way around the armhole. I'm gonna go ahead and take this piece off. For this part, just gives me more freedom to go around in a circle. So I'm holding this fold right there on this seam. And then now for our 1/8 inch seam allowance, we'll do a back stitch here, and then we'll start going forward. Oops, I forgot to move my needle. And then remembering to push that shoulder seam toward the back of the bodice when you get to it. And then here we are back at the fold. So what I like to do here is grab my scissors, and while I have it laying flat, I'll just cut this bias tape off right where that fold is, right there. Okay, so that they line up like that. And then we just keep on stitching. Go a little bit past that back stitch and then pull it out. And I'll show you what this does. Okay, so that all makes one nice seam. We've got these pieces like this. And so what we're gonna do is flip it around to the wrong side of the fabric. And that finishes up that raw edge. So I actually show you what I do here. And cut a little diagonal line. That just helps it to tuck in better, okay? So that covers up the raw edge, like that. Here's the raw edge. And we're just folding the bias tape down like that, all the way around. Okay, so I'm gonna go to my iron. I'm gonna iron this, and then bring it back to the machine and top stitch it. Okay, I'm gonna start a little bit above the, where the fabric comes together here, and I'm going to move my needle over to the left so that it's right on the edge of the fold. Do a back stitch and then going forward here. And yes, I have 5 little ones who are wide awake now playing in the living room, so there's going to be some background noise. That's my 2-year-old. Oh, actually, she's not 2 yet. And then a back stitch. Lift up that needle, foot, trim it, and now we have a finished arm. That's the outside, that's the inside. Okay, so I'm gonna go do the other armhole just like that, and then we'll be back for doing the skirt part of this dress. The bodice is now finished. And this is the front of the bodice. This is what the inside looks like. With all those raw edges nicely covered. So when it goes through the wash, you won't have a bunch of fraying going on. Now onto the skirt for the dress. So I have my 2 pieces cut out here and ironed just a bit, not too picky about that. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna put the right sides together. You want the right sides touching each other. This is so that the seam is on the inside of the dress and not on the outside of the dress. So I'm just gonna line up these raw edges on both sides of the skirt. I'm not going to be too picky right now because I'm going to move it over to my machine. I'm just showing you guys what I do. And I don't use pins or clips for these kind of things. I've been doing it for so long that I just do it at my machine. But it would be helpful if you're a beginner to use some pins or clips. So if you're going to use pins, I like to pin going this way, so that as the fabric feeds through the machine, I can easily pull them out. Or you could also go this way with them all the way down. But an even better invention that I use now, if I need to clip or pin something, are these, I think they're called Wonder Clips. And I got these from Amazon. They come in this small size or this big size. I really like the small size better. But what you would do with these is you would just clip all the way down just to hold the fabric in place while you're sewing. So we're going to bring this over to the machine and we're going to do a straight stitch down one side and a straight stitch down the other side. And now we are stitching down the short side of the rectangle. All right, so what I do when I get to this point, because I don't use pins or clips, which you can do also, is I just line up my corners like that, okay? And then I stick it in my machine. And then I just keep it lined up as I go. All the way down to the bottom corner here. And just go. Okay. Put this off here. And then the other side. Just like that. Stick it in here. Okay, so we have our two sides sewn up. Okay, now we're gonna hem the bottom of the skirt. Now, this fabric isn't directional, so it doesn't matter which part is the bottom. I like to start on the seam, and I eyeball this. I fold it up about 1/4 of an inch. And I just fold as I go. Fold and press. As far as I can, like that. And then I'll just pick up my fabric and move it over. And have room to do more. Okay. And we're gonna just do that all the way around the entire bottom. All right, so we've got that ironed all the way around. Now I'm just going to flip this up just right on top of itself. And then I'm gonna start ironing another 1/4 of an inch. I do believe that the pattern calls for 1 inch or 1/2 inch at this point, but I just use this bottom raw edge right here as my guide. And that's just where I put it. So my skirts might be a little longer than what the pattern calls for, but I'm okay with that. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and do this all the way around. The hem is ironed all the way around the whole skirt. So now we're gonna go take it and top stitch it, remembering to stay right at the edge of the fold. I am really hoping I don't run out of a bobbin on this step. I'm I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna have to spin a new bobbin anyways before I do my gathering stitches, so hoping it'll last for this hem. So here we go. Ironing makes it go so much faster. Stays folded nicely, and as you can see, got a nice neat stitch going on there. Bobbin's still going. Still going. Still going. It was almost gone, but it is still going. Oh my. Are we gonna make it? Oh, is it gone? It's gone. Ran out this much too short. So we're gonna have to take a break now. Spin a bobbin. Ta-da. The bodice is done and the two skirt pieces are sewn together and hemmed. So the skirt piece is pretty much done. As you can see, the skirt piece is much bigger at the waist than the bodice. That's where gathering comes in. So right now I'm going to show you how to do a gathering stitch up along this edge, and the way I do that over here, I keep my needle at 0 and I put my stitch length as far as it will go at 4. I also do my tension dial as high up as it goes, so mine is at 9, and then I simply just do a straight stitch. For my gathering stitch, I like to go quite a ways down from the raw edge so that I can pull it out easily after it's sewn to the bodice. So I'm just gonna sew this. Oh, what I was gonna say also is I'm gonna go from one side seam to the other side seam and stop, and then I'll start again here and go to the other side seam. So I will have 2 gathering stitches, one on each side of the skirt. Okay. Slowly so that we can stop right there. We stop right at the next seam. Give us a nice good thread, and we've got that nice loose stitch right there. I'm gonna do that on the other side now. I just finished the gathering stitch, and a tip I have for you is to immediately put your settings back to where they go so that you don't accidentally start sewing again with your settings on a gathering stitch, which I have done a million times. So my settings are back to normal. Now I'm gonna go gather this. Flip this inside out, which you will wanna do, okay? So flip it inside out, and you're gonna grab that bobbin thread. This was the thread that was the bobbin, okay? And I'm just going to start pulling it like this and working fabric down the piece of thread. So that you can see what I'm doing here, I'm just going to show you real quick. That's how we're gathering it. So what I actually do right before I start that, to find the middle of the front and the middle of the back, I take the 2 side seams and I line them up together. And that is how I find the middle of one side, and I put a clip there. Okay, so I clip this right in the middle here. And then same for the other side. We'll line up the side seams, fold it in half, and that's how we find the middle of the other side. So that's the middle of the front and the middle of the back. Now we put the bodice inside of the skirt. Okay, so I'm going to line up the bodice side seam with the seam of the skirt. So we have, and right sides together, very important here. We have the inside of the bodice, inside of the skirt. The seams are lined up. So we put a clip there. Just like that. We do the same thing to the other side. And that side seam and the side seam of the skirt. Line those up. Flip it. Okay, shoot, sorry. We also needed to find the middle of the front bodice and middle of the back bodice. So same thing, lining up the side seams and finding that middle point, which is right here. Putting a clip on that. And same for the back. Which is right there, okay? So now we find where we clipped on the skirt for the middle, and we line it up where we clipped on the bodice for the middle. Remove one of the clips, and so there we have that. Here's the middle of the bodice here, and the middle of the skirt. Line those up. Replace it with the one clip. All right, so now we have the bodice here and the skirt around it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull that bobbin thread and I'm gonna work the fabric around the thread until it is the same size as the bodice. So I do this in quarters. I'm gonna do this little section here with this thread. Then I'm gonna come over here and do this side of the thread. And I'm gonna work this one to match this. And then again for this piece, quartered edge, and this quarter, and then the whole skirt will be gathered up around the bodice. This is the finished gathering of the skirt. So the bodice is not gathered, but the skirt is. So basically we shrunk the waist part of the skirt down to the bodice. And now all we need to do is go and do a straight stitch on this. Now I'm gonna be tracing. Basically what I like to do is I use the edge of my foot here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. The edge of the foot here, right there. And that is where I put my fabric. So my fabric will be feeding in right at the edge of this foot here. I hope that makes sense. And so the needle is here, which will be stitching above the gathering stitch that we made. So that's what we're gonna do, okay? And now this is an actual stitch, so we do need to do a back stitch here so that it won't come undone. We do not back stitch when you do a gathering stitch. I might have forgot to mention that. When you do the gathering stitch, do not back stitch at the beginning and at the end. All right, so just gonna make sure those raw edges are lined up, the bodice and the top part of the ruffle. Just gonna stitch like this all the way down. You wanna make sure you catch those ruffles in the thread. If they pop out at all, you will be able to see them on the right side of the dress when it's finished. So keep them in that needle. Something else I need to mention here is you need to keep an eye on this bodice underneath, that it stays flat, okay? Because if this folds up at all and does this, that will get caught in the thread, it will get caught in the seam, and you'll have to redo it. So as I go, as I'm stitching here and I'm lining up this raw edge, I'm also constantly flipping to make sure that it's flat on the underside. I came to the beginning of my seam here, so I'm gonna just overlap it a tad and back stitch it just to seal that off, and that's it for the... Okay, we're gonna take the gathering stitch out. So this is that long thread we had, and we're just gonna, I'll just kind of wind it up around my hand, and it just slides like right out of the fabric until it comes out, which, there we go. It all came out. And now we're gonna flip. Okay, first of all, if you are using a regular sewing machine and you don't have a serger, you're done. You are done with this dress. Okay, because you flip it inside out and it's done. Here's the gathering stitch on the opposite side. You can see it really easy, and it's just gonna pull right out, just like that. Okay, so if you're using a regular machine, you're done with this little dress. And now, for anyone who wants to know, I do have a serger. If you have a serger, we're just gonna go and we're just gonna serge this edge to finish it off. All right. I like the ruffle side up, and I like to start on side seams. And go, go, go. Always making sure that bodice is flat on the bottom so it doesn't get caught in the seam. If you don't have a serger, you can see why this is such a cool tool to have if you're going to be making clothing regularly. Taking off all the fray, and you know, fray gets even worse when you put it in the washing machine. See how that ruffle can bend right there? If that got caught in the machine, that would ruin the bodice. So that's what we're constantly checking doesn't happen. We get to where we started right here, we're going to overlap it just a little bit and then go off to the side. Where's my scissors? Thank you. And we just cut that tail. I like to cut the tail nice and long because then I tie a little knot in it. It will come unraveled if you don't do something. And for me, this is just fast and easy. No one's ever gonna see it. Get that knot way down there at the bottom, like that, and snip it. So now the inside of the skirt is finished. There won't be any frayed edges. Flip it right side out. It's getting loud in here. And it's done. A little sundress. Oh, it's so cute. And here's the back. A little V-neck in the back.